August 12th, 2024 special session. Item number 1, we have a request to move it to our Wednesday meeting. Do I have a motion moving forward then?
Mr. Chair, I move that we move item 1 to Wednesday, August 14th as asked, recommended.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, that brings us to item number 2, discussion, approval, disapproval of the canvass of election results from the July 30th, 2024 primary election. Mrs. Dana Lewis. Ms. Dana Lewis.
Mr. Chair, before we go into this, I would ask that we go to executive session for a minute to discuss legal issues with County Attorney Volkman.
We have is that a motion?
I'll second your motion.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, we're going to go into executive session.
Can I go sit back down?
You can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or stand there.
Chairman Goodman, members of the board, Dana Lewis, Pinal County Recorder. We've put together a small presentation in regards to canvassing the primary election of 2024. We thought that it would be best, other than just providing all of the canvass documentation to you, to kind of give you an overview of some statistics. Next. We thought it also prudent to go back to 2016 and look at some of our voter turnout. And as you can see, we're at, for this past election, a little over 25%. And for the primary, we were at over 77,000 votes cast for the primary. People always like to know the numbers in regards to the different party that are involved in the primary election. So you can see in the different graphs that the Republicans turned out at about 44%, the Dems 36%, the registered voters in the No Labels Party, which we now have a faction of here, about 3%, the Libertarian and the Green Party, and then, of course, registered voters that are either party not designated, independent, or other at a little over 8%. Of course, wanting to compare the different methods of voting, you show 62% for the early voting. Election day, that is at almost 20%. Late earlies, those are the ballots that are received on election day, a little bit over 17%. And then, of course, less than 1% for provisional ballots. This is part of the canvass document. Yes, sir?
We have a question.
Absolutely.
If I may, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Those percentages are based off the 77,000 votes.
That
not
is
off
correct.
the total,
That's
but off the 77 that voted. Okay.
Yes, Chairman
Just wanna make
Goodman,
sure.
Supervisor Miller, that is correct. This is one of the pages that is part of your canvas. This is one that I think, as you see all the statistics, where we garner that, so that ballots cast total 77,591, that's where that is gained from. Yes, ma'am? Early ballot rejection report, one of the statistics that you'll see is ballots that were rejected. I think it's important for people to understand why ballots get rejected. There is some misinformation about there that we're just out there chucking them. That's not the case. They have to either be the ballot was missing from the envelope. Sometimes voters put their instruction sheets back in the affidavit envelope. The day after the election, we'll receive ballots, and statute says that we must receive them in the county of the voter by 7 p.m. on election day. We do have deceased, no no voter signature, non-matching signatures. Even though we do our best to cure the weekend before and weekend after the election, still we will make those calls and send those letters, and still voters will not cure. The temporary away with the United States Postal Service, sometimes they're spoiled. Then, of course, undeliverable. And then sometimes people already voted. They sent them one ballot, and then they sent another. The first one is canceled, and so the second one is considered an already voted. Next. There's been a lot of talk in the past in regards to provisional ballots, and why we showed you one of the earlier slides. I think it's really important to show this. This is an area of pride for the team. In 2016, you'd see that this is before the e-poll books, how many provisional ballots were cast. You saw a huge tick in the 2016 and 2018. Again, these were before the e-poll books. In 2020, we did bring the e-poll books on with the hope to reduce that number and increase the accuracy in the division. And then you see that number go down. We see 333 as a pretty big success, and I'll explain that later. So there's some things that we did this election that maybe we didn't do in the past, or at least I don't believe as effectively as we did for this election. Every voter who voted on Election Day received a QR code for a survey. They were handed out at the polls. We have already received 368 responses, and 89% of that feedback has been garnered as positive. Also, we had feedback sessions with any of our ambassadors and county employees and the different division heads that were involved in our processes during our planning meetings. We've been provided feedback and overwhelming acknowledgement in the trust in our voting systems. We'll be using all feedback received for enhancing the voting experience for the general election. The political observer reports received from both the Democratic and Republican parties. I'd like to specifically say thank you to Nancy, Kirk, Sheila, Vicki, Lisa, Belinda, Kathy, Jen, and there are so many more that I'm sure I'm forgetting. They're methodical and very pointed representations of what they saw at the poll, what they saw during in-person early voting, the discussions that were had while they were there watching the provisional process, the check-in process, even to give us areas of creativity to increase our activities, to alleviate bottlenecks. It's been really great to have that integration and interface with the political observers on such a positive level. Voter education outreach. I want to talk about this for a second because we are out there in the field with voter education groups, with your town halls. Anytime you invite us to be present, we do our best to make sure that we're not overbooking ourselves, but to be present, to explain the difference between a presidential preference election to a primary election to a general election. And I think the fact that we've been out there educating people about what it means to be a precinct-based voting model is one of the great reasons that we saw such a reduction in provisional ballots this election. And so again, I wanted to point that out from the team as a major win. The difference between, again, the PP, the primary, and the general, going forward, I think when we get into the midterm elections and also into the future general election in 2024, I think we probably need to even go a little bit harder. People showed up at the primary election and were very distraught that they were not voting for the president. And so, again, to explain to them that the PPE is, narrowing that. The primary election is for our partisan races, and that independents can vote in that, and they can select a partisan-style ballot if they wish for Republicans or Democrats. And I know every time I got up here and spoke during our MOU meetings, I made sure that I was having those conversations with you because people come back to watch this. We've trained staff to make those touches with voters, but still there's always that confusion, especially with independent voters, because I don't have a party chair to reach out to. They're independent. So again, thank you for allowing me the time when I've been at the podium to talk about those problems. Poll worker training, the manual was updated to be extremely effective. The table of contents were made to be an easy resource for the poll workers at the voting locations to go to make sure that they understood the assignment and were being effective, to include with the official ballot reports. And I will say that going forward, the response about poll worker training is that they wish it to be more position-centric. They want to know if it's like set up like a polling location to have the inspector, the marshal, the ID clerk. They want to do more hands-on. Everybody has the manual and they get the LMS, the online videos, but they'd really like to get the hands-on. So going into the general election, we're going to kind of change things up and get everybody up off their feet and doing stuff. And then the ambassadors were welcomed across all of the locations. They expressed enthusiasm. Voters really enjoyed having county staff available at those locations to ask questions and enhance that experience. And poll workers liked having that trusted source to turn to. Process enhancements going into the general election include, this was our first election in our new facility. And, of course, we learned. We learned that, one, I think everybody in the department got their steps in that day. So that's a win because it's such a large facility. But also that there is a lot of space and trying to make sure that we're being effective in our processes. Cross-training of staff in voter registration and early voting department, especially coming into our primary election, a lot of our deadlines are up on top of each other. So when we have a lull in early voting, they're able to jump in and assist with petition signatures, and we saw that as a success as well. Key personnel have been identified that they should no longer be accomplishing tab and tech support on election day. It creates a bog in the process if one of my techs who would normally be working on one of the tabulators gets pulled away, then that tab goes down. So we realized that was a bottleneck, and so we'll be changing that going forward. And of course, the troubleshooter routes were updated. The amount of people that are county employees that come together to help us execute our elections in Pinal is overwhelming and awe-inspiring. And as the person who gets to stand up here, I would like to say from the bottom of my heart and deepest pit of my soul, thank you so much. Are there any questions?
Before we do that, can we have you come up and say a few things?
Good morning, Board. How's everyone doing this afternoon?
Fantastic.
Ken Falkmer, your county attorney. Before I get into this too much further, I am going to ask the Board to waive any privilege in this upcoming discussion because we're going to talk about the canvas. And for me to be able to answer any of your questions publicly, I have to have your explicit authority. So either you ask a question and I have to go answer it in there, then we have to come back and waive it, or you in advance can say, for the limited purposes of this discussion, you would waive any privilege to facilitate a conversation. So that is my request to the Board at this time.
Do we need to have a motion and then an individual vote?
I would prefer that to make it clear. And this is really in response to a bar complaint that was filed against a different county attorney where the conversation occurred and he ended up getting admonished, and the state bar made some relatively strong statements about the proper way to do it.
Okay, sounds good.
Mr. Chair, I'd move that we waive attorney-client privilege for this specific moment.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Let's do roll call.
Supervisor Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Supervisor Miller.
Aye.
Supervisor Surdy.
Aye.
Vice Chairman McClure.
Aye.
Chairman Goodman.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Board. I appreciate it. May I proceed forward?
You bet.
Okay, we're here today to canvass the election. If this board will recall, during the 2022 election, a board down in Cochise County chose not to canvass. There was litigation that ensued, and in fact, there was some actual statutory changes to the law that were made as a result of that. The canvass is, I'm going to read directly from the Secretary of State's 2023 election procedural manual. There are parts of it that have been challenged. There are parts of it that have been found to be improper. This is not in question. This is not anything that is legally changed. And I'm just going to read from it. It's on page 248 if anybody at home would like to follow, and it's under the scope of duty to canvass. The Board of Supervisors has a non-discretionary duty to canvass the returns as provided by the county recorder. Further, has no authority to change vote totals, reject the election results, or delay certifying the results without express statutory authority or a court order. That express statutory authority is actually found in the statute. I believe it's subsection C of, I believe it's 642, and that is if a precinct did not return their votes. So let's say precinct 15, the numbers didn't match up, you could continue delaying by 1 day until you get those in. That has not been the case. That is not what the recorder or the elections department has revealed. So at this point, there does not appear to be any statutory grounds for you to delay. Under ARS 16642, you have 14 days after the election or within 14 days after the election to canvass. That brings us to today's date. So essentially, you have about 4 hours and 20 minutes, give or take, to canvass the election. I think what I just want to reiterate, not only to this board, but to all the members of the public, the canvass is very important because this is, while it's not the board saying, hey, we believe that this is correct. Now, you may feel that way, but that's not what the canvass is for. What the canvass is for is it's drawing a line in the sand. And it says if anybody believes that these election results are not appropriate, if they want to challenge them, the 5-day window begins as soon as you canvass. So essentially, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, ultimately you can't bring a court challenge, so it wouldn't count, so they would have till Monday. But that period to challenge does not begin to today. If somebody wanted to challenge the results, they can't do it until you do this. So this is a very important process with respect to it actually starts the ability to bring an elections challenge. And again, if nothing happens within 5 days, the results are verified, they're certified, and we move on with the election. At this point, that's all I have for you, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Volkner.
Thank you.
Dana? Now let's, I believe you asked if there was any questions, right?
Chairman Goodman, members of the board, yes.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Supervisor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Lewis, the day after the election, Adrian Fontes on the talk radio said there were problems with the election in Arizona ran pretty smoothly except for infrastructure problems in Pinal County. Could you explain what that was?
Chairman Goodman, members of the board.
It impacted the canvass. If it impacted, what would occur in the canvass?
Chairman Goodman, members of the board, Supervisor Kavanaugh, I had a conversation with the Secretary of State's office that same day in request about that statement, and I was instructed that that was completely taken out of context and were not the words that he used during that interview.
Okay. We'll go back and find that and make sure. And then my assistant will deliver a report to the board right now that details what we discovered as mathematical problems and statistical problems with the results of 6 local elections. So that has no bearing on whether we can or cannot canvass today. But those, including myself, who believe that the election results are incorrect will simply say under duress because we cannot not vote for it.
So go ahead. He wants to distribute some documents that he says he has.
That's purely at your discretion, Chairman.
At my discretion. Okay.
I mean, to do it at this meeting, he's always free to do that on his own at any other time, but to do it at this meeting, it's to your discretion.
Okay. Does any board member want to weigh in on this?
Mr. Chair, would that not be part of a legal challenge brought after the canvas? Just a question.
If I may.
No. Kent, he has a question for you.
Whether it's distributed at this time, if it's emailed immediately following this meeting, whether it's distributed via regular inter-office mail tomorrow, it potentially could be part of an elections challenge. It's really just a formality if you want to take it at this time. If you take it at this time, it would immediately become part of the public record. There would be a copy that needs to be provided to our Madam Clerk of Courts, and she would have to publish that same documentation. Whereas if you didn't accept it today and it were emailed or distributed otherwise, it would require a PRR. That's really the only difference. It's an apples and oranges.
Okay. Did you want to ask more?
No, I just wanted clarification. Thank you.
How about the other two? Any questions in regards to that? Okay. And for me, I'm not going to allow it. That could be part of the, if there is a dispute or anything else of that nature, then that can come out then. But this is not a place that needs to be used for a particular candidate to make a statement. And so, no,
If I
that's
may
where I'm at.
respond.
No.
So I am
No,
a
you
candidate,
cannot.
but there
No.
are 5 other candidates.
I've said no.
I'm a county
I've said no.
supervisor.
I've said no, though.
And so I am
the
aware
chairman.
that
What
5
can we
other
do?
candidates have expressed that very strange level of the candidates came to me and said that there was no difference in the returns between
can you turn off
early
his mic?
and poll. So in my role as a county supervisor, I am
Thank you.
protecting the integrity of their election, even apart from mine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I didn't give you permission, so you're not welcome. Okay, with that being said, do we have any, in regards to all of this, because one candidate, obviously, he has a disputation. Where I have a problem personally is that when it comes to, and I don't know where the rest of you stand, but I think this needs to be said publicly. The allegations made on several different occasions by this particular supervisor.
Point of order, Mr.
No, there
Chairman.
is
Our
no point
rules,
of order.
you're violating the rules.
But I didn't
We are
say-
discuss the only thing, and we can get legal counsel that the only topic we are discussing right now, is it true, Mr. Volkmer, is the canvass. Is that correct? And any other topic discussed would be outside and violation of open meeting law. Am I correct, Mr.
But
County
this is-
Attorney?
Okay, hold on a second.
Forgive me.
Chairman Goodman?
Yes.
Yes, the item for discussion is approval, disapproval of the canvass of the results. So that is the item that you're waiting for a motion on at this point in time.
Okay, can I get a motion moving forward then?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the canvass as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any
I
opposed?
under duress.
Oh, it's still an aye.
That's correct, sir.
It's still an aye, correct? Okay. All right.
Can we just further confirm there was no opposition because I did not hear?
I did not hear any opposition.
Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Supervisor Surtee.
Yeah, at the last regular meeting, I thanked all of the workers that made the election happen. But I also wanted to thank all of the facilities and schools that offer up their buildings to have the elections in, especially the schools. I know a couple years ago they didn't want to have them anymore, and it is a hassle to the places that have them. And I see the Scottsdale School District is saying no more elections in their schools. I think that's totally wrong because I think it's so educational for the students to know, to be a little bit of disruption, to say, hey, what's happening today? then everybody explains to them the most sacred thing that we do is happening today. They're voting, and they're doing right at your school. So I wanted to thank, once again, everybody that offers up their facilities to have our elections in them. Without them, it would be very difficult to do. So thank you.
Supervisor Miller, did you have a comment?
I do. Well, this is a shameful situation here today. Shameful. It's a clown show. We have one duty to canvass these votes, and we can't hardly get it done. Accusations that were false are horrible.
Point of order, the rules of the board.
Mr.
No, you don't have the board. You don't. You've already said
personal attacks.
he's making in regards to the canvassing, and that's what he's talking about. Go ahead.
So, anyway, I would just say we probably ought to adjourn this thing before it gets really out of hand.
Mr.
Okay.
Goodman,
We
the
are
rules, I
adjourned.
will explain my vote.
No. We're adjourned.